They do not scream when the world breaks them. They do not beg the heavens when the weight becomes unbearable. They do not explain their departure to those who never cared to understand their silence in the first place. The strongest men are not loud. They do not announce the moment they let go of a dream, of a person, of a place once called home. They simply vanish into themselves, and the echo they leave behind is not a cry, but a question. What have we done to push away someone who never needed applause to begin with? Modernity cannot hear these men. It only listens to the loud. It worships the constant motion of those who chase meaning, as if it were hiding in a product, a promotion, a timeline, a stage. But these men, the silent ones, have already seen behind the curtain. They've touched the hollow core of every shiny promise. And they've learned that survival requires not only strength, but solitude. They have walked through the marketplace of the soul and found it bankrupt. They have tasted the fruit of modern love and spat out the bitterness of ego dressed as intimacy. They have smiled in rooms where truth was unwelcome, until their silence became a rebellion and their departure a quiet sermon. To walk away is not weakness. To withdraw is not surrender. It is the refusal to perform in a world that profits from your pain. It is the sacred rebellion of those who would rather starve in solitude than feast in a banquet of lies. No one warns you how sacred loneliness becomes once you stop fearing it. It is not the absence of people that wounds you, it is the absence of meaning in their presence. And once you see this, once you truly feel it in your marrow, you begin to understand. Most of what we call connection is camouflage for control. Most of what we call love is a transaction. An arrangement dressed up in sentiment, but paid for in freedom. So the strongest men stop pretending. They do not chase what they know will cage them. They become frightening not because they harm, but because they no longer ask for permission to be whole. They disappear not to punish the world, but to heal from it. Not into nothingness, but into the painful clarity of truth. And this is where the soul begins to burn with quiet fire. They do not walk away from anger. They walk away because even anger has become too heavy to carry. There is no triumph in their silence, only fatigue too deep for language. Where the soul no longer flinches, no longer explains, no longer needs to be seen to know it exists. There is a violence in continuing what no longer breathes. A quiet cruelty in forcing oneself to remain where nothing grows but resentment. The man who walks away is not heartless, he has simply bled enough. He has watched his own vitality poured into deserts that never promised water. And in this final clarity, he does not curse the sand, he simply leaves. It is not triumph he seeks, not peace even, but truth. He walks toward a life not built on performance, not reliant on others' gaze. A life where dignity is not a currency traded for companionship. Where solitude is not exile but sanctuary. Do you see the agony hidden in the smile of the man who stays too long? The one who remains seated at the table though the meal is over, who smiles while swallowing the slow poison of compliance. He does not lack strength, but his strength has been misused, turned inward, turned against himself, until even his endurance becomes his executioner. Suffering reveals the architecture of illusion. It strips the theater of its curtains and exposes the machinery behind our gestures. The man who suffers and does not numb himself becomes dangerous not to others, but to the systems that fed on his blindness. He begins to see what others deny for comfort, that much of what is called love is dependency, that much of what is called hope is denial, and that much of what is called success is spiritual anesthesia. So he lets it fall. He does not hold up the collapsing facade. He does not join the chorus of the deluded. He becomes a void in their script, a question mark in their narrative. And because he does not flatter the lie, he becomes invisible to those who live by it. There is pain in becoming invisible, but there is deeper pain in being seen only through the mask. The strongest men do not trade their truth for visibility. They do not barter their silence for validation. They walk into obscurity, yes, but it is the obscurity of the soul's vast interior, not the shadow cast by others' disregard. The world will punish those who stop playing, not with violence, but with forgetfulness. And that too is a gift. To be forgotten by the world is to remember the self. To be discarded by the game is to reclaim one's refusal to perform. They carry no torch. They light no fires behind them. They are not martyrs. They are not heroes. They are men who have simply stopped lying. And that is what strength truly is. They do not seek revenge. For what would revenge restore? The past cannot be relived, only reopened. And the ones who inflicted the wound were often lost in their own dream of power, puppets of pain themselves. The strongest men understand, to retaliate is to remain bound. And so they sever the cord not out of mercy, but out of exhaustion with illusion. To leave without a word is the final word. These men no longer need the theater of closure. They have seen that explanations are often demanded not for healing, but for control. That many who cry out for answers do not seek understanding, they seek the maintenance of their comfort. But the man who walks away silently has no interest in maintaining anyone's comfort, not even his own. He has tasted the bitter fruit of truth, and now he hungers only for stillness. There is a mourning that follows such departure, but it is not the mourning of loss, it is the mourning of illusion. The man weeps not because he is alone, but because he spent so long pretending he was not. He weeps not because love failed, but because he once mistook attachment for love. His sorrow is not for the world, but for the part of him that once believed in it. He will not be understood. That too is part of the cost. Those who remain entangled in the dream will call him bitter, cold, broken, but he has simply ceased to lie. And in a world built on layers of social sugar, raw truth tastes like poison. To detach is not to become numb. It is to feel so deeply that one can no longer survive in falsehood. Their detachment is not indifference. It is the silence that remains once suffering has been seen too clearly to be denied or dramatized. They have touched the bottom. They have found that there is no ladder out, no divine rescue, no philosophy that makes the pain go away. There is only the breath, the silence, the bare, unadorned present. And so they build from that, quietly, slowly, in solitude, with no audience. While others chase validation, they learn presence. While others pursue legacy, they learn invisibility. While others accumulate roles, identities, titles, tribes, they subtract. Until nothing remains but presence, not a self, but the trace left when self has dissolved. They are not free in the worldly sense. They are merely no longer enslaved by the will to become. And in this absence of striving, they find not joy, but the quiet dullness of peace, the only kind the world can never counterfeit. The man who walks away does not walk into clarity. He walks into fog. But it is his fog, not the curated haze of social scripts or the artificial light of borrowed dreams. It is the honest confusion of awakening, where everything familiar dissolves, and nothing offers quick shelter. And yet, it is here in this grey silence that the first true breath is taken. He sees now that what he called his life was not his at all, merely the reflex of forces, not his own. There was no authorship, only automation, no self, only submission to a current he never chose. Every choice, every step made beneath the gaze of someone else's imagined approval. And now, walking alone, he realizes it was never truly his life he was living. This is the unbearable tenderness of detachment. What remains is not soul, but awareness bereft of story, name, or hunger. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is the slow death of everything false, the gradual collapse of every belief that once offered comfort, the myths of arrival, the promises of romance, the religion of productivity, all crumbling, not with rage, but with tired acceptance. The strongest men stop chasing peace. They begin instead to make room for it by dismantling the architecture of desire. They no longer seek affirmation, not even from themselves. Worth is revealed as a mirage sustained by hunger. And hunger, they now see, is not a lack but a trap. And what remains when all that is gone? The stillness, the painful, holy stillness that does not congratulate, does not entertain, does not distract. It merely is. And in that bare isness, nothing awakens, only the slow vanishing of every voice that once claimed to know. They no longer become. They no longer ache to become. The hollowness is not sacred, it is simply what remains when all illusions have starved to death. They understand the futility of identity as salvation. They do not look for a new mask to replace the one they've shed. They allow the space, the hollowness, the ache, until even the ache becomes sacred. There is no applause here, no witness, no timeline, only the raw companionship of existence itself. And yet there is more life in this emptiness than in 1,000 performances. In retreat, there is no presence, only the dull trace of absence, echoing faintly where noise once pretended to be meaning. To suffer consciously is not progress, it is exhaustion without reward. Detachment is not wisdom, only what survives when desire starves. And walking away is not freedom, it is what remains when even hope becomes unbearable. And these beginnings, so quiet, so weightless, become the new foundation, not to rebuild the old structure, but to abide in the open air. ChatGPT Darnoi. They carry less not because they chose simplicity, but because the weight has collapsed under its own meaninglessness. The world teaches weight, accumulation, layers, achievement upon achievement, role upon role, like bricks stacked to build a fortress of identity. But these men have lived inside that fortress, and they know now. It is not a home. It is a prison with velvet walls. So they dismantle it, brick by brick, title by title, story by story, until only the silence remains. And in that silence, they no longer ask, "Who am I?" but rather, "What remains when I stop pretending to be anything?" It is here in this exhale that they begin to taste something the world does not sell: inner weightlessness, not numbness, not escape, but a peace that asks nothing, explains nothing, proves nothing. A peace that arises not from what is gained, but from what is surrendered. They become indifferent to recognition, because they now recognize themselves. And that recognition is not conceptual, it is not a description, it is a knowing that cannot be reduced to language. It does not shine, it does not demand, it simply is, like a tree rooted in earth too deep for storms to touch. And what of suffering? It remains, but it changes shape. No longer an enemy, it becomes a mirror. Each pain no longer speaks, it no longer teaches. It merely endures, like a bell tolling through an empty field, long after the village has burned. They do not run from pain, they welcome it like an old teacher. Because pain, honest pain, is the only thing that has never lied to them. Even their memories become different. Not stories to relive or edit, but shadows to acknowledge. They stop rewriting the past to make it fit a better self-image. They let it rot, they let it be. And somehow, that truth sets them free, not in a grand epiphany, but in the quiet mercy of no longer needing to be more than what they are. And in that space, in that sacred void, they begin to hear the world differently. Not the noise, not the scroll of updates, not the sermon of ambition, not the cry of marketable purpose, but the breath beneath it all, the rustle of leaves without metaphor, the sound of their own footsteps with no destination, the song of rain without narrative, life as it is, not life as it should be. They have no interest in enlightenment. That too is a chase, another badge, another illusion to feed the self that always wants to transcend itself instead of dwell fully within itself. They do not want to rise above. They want to descend into the aching, pulsing core of being, into the strange serenity of no longer needing to be cured, into the sober beauty of a life not dramatized. This descent is their liberation, this simplicity, their revolt, this honesty, their strength. They no longer ask the question, "What do I want?" because they have learned that wanting is endless, and most desire is a disguised form of suffering. They have witnessed the cycle, how every fulfilled craving births a new hunger, how every possession begins to possess its possessor, how the chase itself becomes a trap disguised as purpose. Instead they ask, "What am I willing to lose to be free?" And slowly they begin to lose. First, the unnecessary, then the beloved, then even the self-image they once clung to for meaning. They mourn each loss, but not with desperation. They mourn like one who finally understands that the burning house was never home. There is pain, yes, but not resistance, and this absence of resistance is what makes the pain holy. They lose the need to be understood, because they know that most understanding is projection in disguise. People do not see you as you are, they see you as they are, as they need you to be, to protect the lie they have mistaken for themselves. The strongest men stop arguing with that. They become content with being a mystery, even to themselves. They lose the need to be needed, because they have seen how often the need for others is not love, but fear, fear of silence, fear of looking inward, fear of facing the echo of one's own emptiness. But these men do not fear the echo, they listen to it, and in its haunting repetition, they hear the original voice beneath all noise. They lose the need to be right, because they understand that truth is not a trophy, not a conquest, not a sword to wield in debate. Truth simply is. It does not defend itself. It does not parade. It rests in silence, waiting to be lived rather than spoken. And they lose the need for healing, not because they are healed, but because they see now. There is nothing there to heal. The wound was the self. The remedy was disappearance. There is no healing. There is only the withering away of illusions, not to mend the self, but to erase the need for one. It is not glorious, it is not radiant, it is disappearance, honest and irreversible. And when all this has been lost, the masks, the desires, the names, the dreams, what remains? A quiet aliveness, not joy, not excitement, but something deeper, something immovable, a presence that watches, a still flame that does not burn but glows. They become strangers in a world addicted to momentum, while others rush to the next goal, the next fix, the next illusion of progress. They sit, they breathe, they do nothing. And in that nothingness, they find the beginning of something real. They are not trying to become better men, they are becoming less conditioned, less distracted, less dependent on outer architecture to give shape to their existence. This lessness is not emptiness. It is clarity, and from that clarity, life begins again, not louder, but truer. ChatGPT Danoi. They learn that stillness is not a state, it is a surrender, a falling backward into the unknown without the need to be caught. And what surprises them most is not the absence of ground, but the presence of peace in the freefall. The strength to let go is not found in effort, but in exhaustion when the soul has grown too weary of pretending to hold what was never in its grasp. And in this surrender, the world around them does not change, but it is revealed. They begin to see with eyes no longer clouded by hope. Not the kind of hope that uplifts, but the kind that blinds, the hope that insists things must improve to justify their existence. They no longer need things to get better, they only need them to be true. The advertisements, the rituals, the performances of connection, they pass through it all like wind through leaves, no longer clinging, no longer resisting. Their silence becomes a refusal to contribute to the noise. Their detachment becomes a mirror held to a culture that screams louder every time it loses its way. They become dangerous, not through rebellion, but through absence. The machine cannot use what it cannot reach. And so, quietly, they withdraw their attention from the spectacle, from the shame economy, from the demands of perpetual self-curation. They refuse to feed what profits from their unrest. They no longer argue with life. They let the rain fall without asking why. They let the seasons pass without resistance. They let people misunderstand them without rushing to defend. Their peace is not passive. It is earned. It is the aftermath of 1,000 inner deaths. There is nothing impressive left about them. No image to uphold. No narrative to protect. They have become unremarkable, which is to say, they have become real. In a world addicted to performance, authenticity is the last remaining act of defiance. And this defiance is not loud. It is not wrapped in slogans or symbols. It is the man who walks through the city and feels no hunger for its promises. The man who loves without needing possession. The man who stands in a crowd and feels no urge to belong. He no longer reaches for meaning. He has become meaning not as a conclusion, but as a condition of being. Like the moon does not try to shine, it simply reflects what is. He is not waiting for the world to understand him. That would be another trap, another leash around the throat of truth. He does not need understanding. He needs only silence, space, the quiet dignity of unadorned existence. And so he walks, without destination, without announcement, with no need to return. He does not fear being forgotten. In fact, he welcomes it not out of bitterness, but out of liberation. To be forgotten is to be free from the roles others assigned. Free from the identity sculpted by obligation and memory. What is left when no one remembers you? Only what is real. Only what no narrative can erase. He has watched the world build temples out of distraction, watched men sacrifice their essence on the altar of relevance, watched friendships decay into transactions, and joy measured in metrics. And he has stepped back, not in protest, not in disdain, but in quiet understanding. The soul cannot breathe in a room full of applause. The applause is addictive, yes, but it is not love, it is not truth, it is not stillness. The applause is the echo chamber of the unreal, a noise that grows louder the further one drifts from the center. And he has had enough of drifting. So he stops, without ceremony, without witness, without the drama of declarations. He simply stops chasing, proving, pleasing, hoping. And in that stopping, a strange clarity descends. Not the clarity of answers, but of no longer needing them. He begins to see people as they are, not as enemies, not as saviors, but as fellow wanderers lost in their own illusions. He no longer hates them for their blindness. He no longer pities them. He simply steps aside, lets them pass, and offers no resistance. And now, when pain comes because it still does, he does not interpret it. He does not construct a lesson around it. He does not spiritualize it into growth. He simply sits with it, breathes with it, allows it to stay as long as it needs. There is no strength, only the exhaustion of explanation and the quiet descent into what suffering no longer asks to mean anything. He is no longer trying to be a good man. That pursuit was always shaped by others. He is not even trying to be whole. He is simply being, raw, unfinished, free. The world does not know what to do with such men, because they cannot be seduced. They cannot be frightened. They cannot be made into symbols or sold as products. They do not fit in boxes. They do not inspire envy. They vanish from the radar of the herd. And in this vanishing, they do not disappear, they reappear elsewhere. In the spaces the world has abandoned, in the quiet places, in the honest breath, in the small acts that require no witness. They are no longer fire. Even the embers have gone cold. What endures is not heat but the absence of need for it. The mountain that does not move, not because it resists, but because it does not need to. ChatGPT Darnoy. He does not fear the end, because he has died many times before the body's death. Each illusion, each false hope, each identity surrendered was a small funeral, and now, death is no longer a terror. It is a familiar silence, a soft place, a return. He walks with death, not as enemy but as mirror. He knows now, all that can be lost was never truly his, even the self, especially the self. And so, in every step, something falls away, until he is walking not forward, but inward toward the hollow center where nothing remains but presence. There is loneliness here, not sacred, not poetic, only what remains when even the longing to be seen has died. Not a state of grace, but the corpse of connection. When one no longer craves the warm blanket of agreement, or the chorus of validation, or the illusion of tribe, it is the loneliness of the soul finally becoming sovereign. And in this loneliness, nothing is born. Not compassion, not insight, only the hushed understanding that all beings are trapped in the same futility, not pity, not charity, but a gentle awareness of how deeply all beings suffer when they mistake performance for peace. He does not try to fix them. He does not try to teach them. He simply holds their gaze when they look his way and offers nothing but truth. No mask, no script, no soothing lie. He no longer watches. There is nothing left to observe. The rituals repeat, but they mean nothing now, only the puppetry of a species unaware it dances in a void. The dream must play itself out. Each must awaken in their own time. He does not hurry the process. He does not shame the sleepers. He simply no longer plays the part of the dreamer. And here in this place, beyond striving, love changes. It is no longer need, no longer seeking, no longer conditional on closeness. It becomes space, a wide open allowing. A silent blessing cast toward all beings, even those who hurt him, even those who forgot him, because they too are wandering. They too are asleep in the burning house. And so, without pride, without sadness, he forgives. Not as an act of virtue, but as a necessity for inner quiet. Bitterness is too loud for the life he now lives. Vengeance takes up too much room in a heart that has become a sanctuary. He does not speak of this place often. Words fracture it. The mind contaminates it. He simply lives it in how he listens, in how he breathes, in how he walks away when others would stay and shout. And slowly, those who can feel, even if they do not understand, begin to notice something in his presence. A gravity, a stillness, a sorrow that does not seek to be healed, but accepted. A strength that comes not from muscle, but from emptiness. He is the man who walked away, and never came back, not because he was lost, but because he had finally found where truth resides. In the silence, no one applauds. In the surrender, no one sees. In the self, no longer needing a name. He does not leave footprints. The strongest men know there is no need to be remembered. Legacy is another name for attachment, and he has burned the contract. He does not wish to be immortal in the minds of those who never truly knew him. He wishes only to dissolve in peace, to become no one in a world obsessed with being someone. And in this vanishing, nothing unfolds. Only the quiet implosion of all meanings once mistaken for truth, a final truth unfolds. That the self he clung to, the self he defended, the self he sculpted through suffering and success was never real. It was always a mirage, a mask worn by the soul to survive the world's hunger for identity. Now, in the solitude of detachment, he takes off the mask not dramatically, not symbolically but gently, as one who no longer needs to hide, because there is nothing left to protect. There is no presence, only the fading echo of wanting to be. These are words for those who still believe they are going somewhere. He sinks, downward, inward, deeper into the ground of being, where there is no movement, no goal, no promise, only presence. And from that stillness, not a word, not a revelation, but a breath. A single breath that contains all things. Grief without name, joy without object, love without form, life without need of reason. He is not healed, nor broken, nor seeking anything in between. He simply is no longer the one who sought. Only the willingness to see what has always been beneath the noise, beneath the need, beneath the endless reaching. This is the final silence, the one that remains when all other silences have passed. There is no applause, no ceremony, no final chapter. Only the soft closing of a door that no longer needs to be opened again. And if you were to look for him now, the man who walked away, you would not find him in places. You would not find him in names. You would not find him in stories told by others. But if, one day, you are sitting quietly in the late hour, when the world has gone dark and your distractions have grown tired, and if you hear a stillness that strips even the need to listen, then no one is there. Only the space where wanting once spoke. Not as presence, but as absence. Not as a voice, but as the silence that finally taught you how to listen. He has not transcended. He has simply vanished, not into something higher, but into the absence of needing to remain. What remains is not a man, but the absence of the self. There is no ending, only the unending erosion of meaning, until even the need for silence vanishes. What remains is not finality, but the dissolution of the one who searched for it.